The stars trembled as the HFY War fleet emerged from hyperspace. 3 colossal dreadnoughts, each stretching over 2 kilometers in length, cast shadows across Earth's blue surface. Their black hulls gleamed with energy shields that could vaporize entire cities. Behind them followed dozens of smaller warships, bristling with weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Emperor Drexmar sat on his crystalline throne aboard the flagship Death's Herald, his 6 eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. For 4 millennia, his empire had swept across the galaxy like a plague, enslaving every species they encountered. The humans would be no different. Intelligence reports showed them to be a young, primitive race still using chemical propulsion and metal projectiles. They would surrender within hours as all the others had. "Admiral Kolthek," the Emperor's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, "begin the demonstration. Show these creatures the futility of resistance." Admiral Kolthek, a battle-scarred veteran of 300 conquests, studied the tactical displays with practiced eyes. Earth's orbital defenses were laughably weak, a few dozen space stations and scattered patrol craft. Their largest warship was barely the size of a HFY escort vessel. "Pathetic," Kolthek muttered, his 4 arms manipulating the command interface. "Target their primary orbital installations. Single plasma burst should be sufficient." The first shot lit up space like a miniature sun. Earth's largest defense station, housing over 10,000 personnel, simply ceased to exist. The message was clear: surrender or die. But the humans didn't surrender. Instead, their small fleet began moving into attack formation. Commander Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the carrier Soul's Pride, watching the alien dreadnoughts with calm eyes that betrayed none of the terror his crew felt. At 35, he was young for a fleet commander, but he had been chosen for this moment specifically. Behind him, the bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, their faces pale but determined. "Incoming transmission from the lead alien vessel," reported Communications Officer Park Min-seo, her hands trembling slightly on her console. "Put it through," Hyun-woo ordered. Admiral Kolthek's grotesque face filled the main screen. His reptilian features were arranged in what might have been a smile on a creature capable of such emotions. When he spoke, his voice was a harsh rasp that the translation systems struggled to process. "Primitive creatures of Earth," Kolthek began. "I am Admiral Kolthek of the HFY Empire. Your world is now property of Emperor Drexmar. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will make your species suffer for 1,000 years before extinction." Hyun-woo stepped forward, his expression never changing. "This is Commander Hyun-woo of the Earth Defense Force. We reject your terms. Earth will not surrender." Kolthek's laugh was like grinding metal. "Foolish mammals. Your largest ship would not qualify as a shuttle in our fleet. You fight with toys while we wield the weapons of gods. Then let's see what toys can do," Hyun-woo replied, cutting the transmission. The space battle that followed was brutal and one-sided, exactly as both sides had expected. Human fighters launched from carriers, their pilots knowing they flew to their deaths. The small agile craft darted between the massive alien vessels like insects around giants, their missile strikes barely scratching the enemy's shields. Lieutenant Yoonji, the tactical officer, watched her displays with growing despair as human ships disappeared one by one. "Sir, the Busan Defender has been destroyed. The Incheon's Fury is venting atmosphere. We've lost 60% of our fleet." Fighter pilot Captain Jae-sung's voice crackled over the communications as his squadron engaged a HFY destroyer. "This is Dragon Squadron. We're taking heavy casualties but continuing the attack run. For Earth." His fighter exploded moments. Later taking 2 wingmen with him, Admiral Kolthek watched the slaughter with professional interest. The humans fought with surprising courage, but courage was useless against superior technology. Their weapons couldn't even penetrate HFY shields, while a single plasma burst from his ships could destroy their largest vessels. Yet something bothered him. The human communications were strange. Instead of the usual panic and desperation he heard from dying civilizations, there were odd references to phase protocols and Guardian activation sequences. Their commander seemed almost relieved, as his forces were systematically destroyed. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we are detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. Deep underground sources, very faint." Kolthek dismissed it with a wave. "Probably their primitive nuclear reactors shutting down in panic. Continue the attack." Commander Hyunwoo watched his fleet die with a heavy heart, each lost ship carrying friends and comrades he had known for years. But this had always been the plan. The Earth Defense Force was never meant to win this battle. They were buying time, gathering intelligence, and most importantly, selling the deception that Earth was helpless. "Sir, should we begin the retreat?" asked Lieutenant Yunji, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Hyunwoo nodded grimly. "Signal all remaining units. Begin Phase 1 withdrawal. We've bought them enough time." He paused, then added quietly, Tell them their sacrifice won't be forgotten." As the surviving human ships began their retreat, Admiral Kolthek felt a moment of satisfaction. Another species broken, another conquest completed. Soon his ground forces would land and begin the process of enslaving the survivors. But in the depths of space around Earth, something watched. Ancient sensors that had been disguised as space debris for centuries recorded every detail of the Vorthak attack. Every weapon signature, every shield frequency, every tactical pattern was analyzed and filed away. The real guardians of Earth had been waiting for this moment for over 300 years. Hyunwoo's final transmission echoed across hidden channels, buried so deep that even the Vorthak's advanced sensors couldn't detect them. "Guardian Command, this is Defense Force Actual. The fish have taken the bait. Enemy capabilities confirmed, initiating Protocol 7. Deep beneath the Korean peninsula, in facilities that had been constructed in absolute secrecy over 3 centuries, massive fusion generators that dwarfed anything on Earth's surface began humming to life. Quantum computers the size of city blocks started their calculations. Weapon systems that existed beyond the understanding of galactic science powered up for the first time. The deception was complete. The Vorthak believed they had crushed Earth's defenses. They thought the primitive humans were beaten, ready for conquest. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The real war was about to begin. The massive Vorthak dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors, their heat, shields glowing orange as they punched through the clouds. Each ship carried 200 elite soldiers, genetically modified warriors who had never known defeat. Admiral Kolthek watched from his command ship as dozens of these vessels landed near major cities across the globe. "Landing zones secured," reported Captain Vextar, his voice crackling through the communication system. "Initial resistance minimal, proceeding with occupation protocols." Kolthek leaned back in his command chair, satisfied. This was how it always went. The space battle broke their spirit, and the ground invasion finished the job. Within a week, the humans would be in chains, their planet strip-mined for resources. But something was wrong from the very beginning. Captain Vextar led the first wave into what remained of Seoul. The city showed signs of the orbital bombardment, but not nearly. As much destruction as expected. Most of the buildings stood intact, and strangely there were no bodies in the streets. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. "Spread out," Vextar ordered his troops. "Secure the government buildings. Find their leaders." The Vorthak soldiers moved through the empty streets with practiced efficiency. Their powered armor made them nearly invincible against primitive weapons, and their energy rifles could cut through steel like paper. They had conquered civilizations, far more advanced than this one. That's when the first soldier disappeared. Private Jexmore was scanning an abandoned shopping center when something moved in the shadows. He turned, weapon ready, but saw nothing. Then a brilliant blue light erupted from the darkness, and Gexmore's screams cut short as his armor melted around him. "Contact!" shouted Sergeant Nexeval. But when he reached the position, there was nothing left but a smoking crater and the smell of vaporized metal. The attacks came from everywhere and nowhere. Human fighters appeared from hidden positions, fired weapons that shouldn't exist, then vanished before the Vorthak could return fire. These weren't the crude kinetic weapons they had seen in space. These were energy beams that cut through their armor like it was made of paper. Staff Sergeant Kim Dong-soo crouched in his concealed position, watching the alien patrol through his scope. He had been waiting for this moment his entire adult life. The rifle in his hands looked like standard Earth technology, but its power source was something the Vorthak had never encountered. "Target acquired," he whispered into his communicator. "Engaging." The plasma beam struck the lead Vorthak soldier center mass, punching clean through his armor and dropping him instantly. Before the others could react, more beams erupted from hidden positions around the street. In seconds, the entire patrol was eliminated. "Ghost Team Alpha, this is Phantom Leader," came the voice of Captain Lee Sung-min through Kim's earpiece. "Excellent work. Fade back to secondary positions. Let them think we're just lucky civilians." This pattern repeated across the globe. Vorthak forces would encounter what appeared to be desperate human resistance fighters, suffer casualties, then find nothing but empty buildings when they investigated. The humans seemed to melt away like smoke, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. Captain Vextar's frustration grew with each report. "These aren't civilians," he snarled to his officers. "Civilians don't move like this. Civilians don't have weapons that can penetrate our armor." His communications officer, Lieutenant Kexrun, looked up from his console with confusion. "Sir, intelligence confirms these are just scattered militia groups. Our orbital scans show no major military installations." "Then explain this," Vextar snapped, gesturing to the tactical display showing 18 red markers indicating lost squads. "We've lost more soldiers in one day than we did conquering the hegemony of worlds." In the ruins of what had been a factory district, the 7th Landing Division moved cautiously through the maze of abandoned buildings. Major Texfor had been ordered to investigate reports of strange energy readings in the area. The complex looked like it had been deserted for decades, but his sensors were picking up faint power signatures. "Spread out," he ordered his 100 soldiers. "Something's here." They advanced through the seemingly empty facility, their armor sensors detecting trace amounts of exotic particles in the air. The building's architecture was strange too. Too many reinforced walls, too many power conduits for a simple factory. That's when the walls came alive. Hidden panels slid open, revealing weapon emplacements that had been waiting in silence. The Vorthak soldiers had walked into a perfectly prepared kill zone. Energy beams erupted from every direction. Not the crude human weapons they expected, but something far more sophisticated. "Ambush!" Major Texavor screamed, but his voice was lost in the thunder of weapons fire. Advanced targeting systems locked onto each soldier individually, and within moments, the entire division was eliminated. The weapons powered down, the hidden panels closed, and the factory returned to its appearance of abandonment. There was no trace that anything had happened, except for the absence of 200 Vorthak soldiers. Deep beneath Seoul, in a command center that officially didn't exist, General Nam Jin watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. The facility had been carved from solid rock 300 meters underground, its existence hidden from every orbital scan the aliens might attempt. "Sir," reported Colonel So Young, his second in command, "the Vorthak have lost contact with the 7th Landing Division. They're sending search teams to investigate." Nam Jin nodded approvingly. The deception was working perfectly. The aliens still believed they were fighting scattered human resistance groups, not realizing they were being systematically studied and eliminated by forces they couldn't even detect. "Have Dr. Jamin's team finished calibrating the orbital defense systems?" Nam Jin asked. "Yes, sir," So Young replied. "All plasma cannon arrays are online and locked onto the enemy motherships. We're also detecting increased alien communication traffic. They're starting to get nervous." The general allowed himself a small smile. For 3 centuries, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Every contingency had been planned, every scenario war-gamed. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species, but they were about to learn the truth. "What about the power signature masking?" Nam Jin inquired. "Holding steady," reported Dr. Jamin from his position at the science station. "The quantum dampeners are keeping our true energy output hidden. To their sensors, we still look like a pre-industrial civilization." Above them, aboard the Death's Herald, Admiral Kolthek was beginning to feel the first stirrings of unease. His science officer, a nervous creature named Zektal, had been reporting increasingly disturbing readings from the planet's surface. "Admiral," Zektal said, his voice trembling, "I'm detecting massive power sources activating beneath the planet's crust. The energy signatures are unprecedented." Kolthek's four eyes narrowed. "Unprecedented how?" "Sir, these readings suggest they have fusion reactors more advanced than our own. Some of the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's as if they're using technology we've never encountered." The Admiral's blood ran cold. In 4,000 years of conquest, the Vorthak had never encountered a species with superior technology. It was impossible. Their scouts had confirmed that these humans were primitive, barely capable of spaceflight. "Could our sensors be malfunctioning?" Kolthek asked hopefully. Zektal shook his head. "I've run diagnostics 3 times, sir. The readings are accurate. There are also quantum disturbances in the planet's magnetosphere that suggest the use of exotic matter manipulation." "That's impossible," Kolthek snapped. "Even we haven't mastered exotic matter physics." But deep down, a terrible suspicion was growing. What if their intelligence had been wrong? What if these humans weren't as primitive as they appeared? What if the space battle had been too easy, the resistance too weak? What if they had walked into a trap? On the surface, the deception continued. Human resistance fighters appeared to be desperately fighting a losing battle, using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics, but each engagement provided more data, more intelligence about Vorthak capabilities and weaknesses. The real war was about to begin, and the Vorthak had no idea what they were truly facing. The ground trembled across the entire planet, as if Earth itself was awakening from a long sleep. Admiral Kolthek felt the vibrations through his ship's hull, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from the planet's core. On his tactical display, energy readings spiked beyond anything his instruments could measure. "What is that?" he demanded, staring at the impossible readings flooding his screens. Before anyone could answer, the mountains began to move. What the Vorthak had dismissed as natural geological features across Earth's surface started rising, shedding centuries of carefully maintained camouflage. Massive structures emerged from beneath fake rock and artificial soil, revealing gleaming metal surfaces covered in weapon arrays that made Vorthak technology look primitive. The largest structure rose from what had appeared to be a mountain range in Korea. As dirt and stone fell away like a discarded disguise, a battle station the size of a major city revealed itself. Its surface bristled with weapons the Vorthak couldn't identify, and energy readings that defied their understanding of physics. "Impossible," whispered Science Officer Zektal, his voice barely audible. "That structure, it's generating more power than our entire fleet combined." Similar installations were emerging worldwide. The Swiss Alps revealed themselves as a massive orbital defense grid. What had looked like the Rocky Mountains in North America split open to reveal launch bays filled with ships that dwarfed anything. In the Vorthak Armada, the Himalayas themselves began unfolding like a flower, exposing a command center that could coordinate the defense of an entire star system. Admiral Kolthek's 4 eyes widened in horror as he realized the truth. Earth wasn't a primitive planet they were conquering. It was a fortress that had been waiting for them. Deep within the Korean battle station, now revealed as the New Horizon, Admiral Dong Hyun stood on a bridge that could have housed the entire Vorthak command staff. At 62, he had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment. His silver hair and calm demeanor hid the fact that he commanded weapons capable of cracking planets. "Admiral," reported Commander Yu Jin from the weapons console. "All primary systems are online. Target acquisition is complete. The enemy flagship is locked." Dong Hyun nodded slowly. Commander Yu Jin had been his weapons officer for over 20 years, one of the most brilliant tactical minds humanity had ever produced. Like everyone else in the hidden defense forces, she had trained her entire career for this single battle. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Commander Junho from the communications station, "we're receiving panicked transmissions from the Vorthak fleet. They're trying to understand what's happening." "Let them wonder," Dong Hyun replied. "Target their command ship. Let's send a message to their emperor." The main weapon of the New Horizon was based on principles that the greatest minds in the Vorthak Empire couldn't comprehend. It didn't fire energy or projectiles in any conventional sense. Instead, it manipulated the fundamental forces that held matter together, reaching out across space to simply unmake whatever it touched. Admiral. Koltek watched his tactical display in growing terror as targeting beams locked onto his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He had commanded this ship for over 50 years, leading it to victory in countless battles. Its shields could withstand the combined firepower of a dozen enemy fleets. "Maximum shields," he screamed. "All power to defensive systems." The Eternal Conquest's barriers flared to life, energy fields that could deflect plasma blasts hot enough to melt planets. Every defensive system the ship possessed activated simultaneously, creating layers of protection that should have been impenetrable. The beam from the New Horizon simply ignored them all. It passed through the shields as if they weren't there, through the armor as if it were made of paper, and touched the ship's quantum core. The Eternal Conquest, pride of the Vorthak fleet, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a 2-kilometer-long symbol of imperial might. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space where it had been. No explosion, no debris. No trace that it had ever existed at all. The remaining Vorthak ships recoiled in absolute terror. In 4,000 years of conquest, they had never encountered anything like this. Their most powerful vessel had been erased from reality itself. "Sir," Commander Yujin reported with professional calm. "Direct hit confirmed. Enemy flagship eliminated. No trace remaining." Donghyun allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Now let's see if they want to talk." Aboard the surviving Vorthak vessels, panic spread like wildfire. Crews that had never known defeat suddenly found themselves facing technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. Officers who had conquered 1,000 worlds now trembled at their stations. "Admiral Kolthek is dead," reported Captain Hextar from the surviving command ship Void Stalker. "The flagship is gone, completely gone. Our sensors can't even detect debris." Commander Bexnall, now the highest-ranking officer in the fleet, stared at the empty space where their flagship had been. "Open communication channels with the humans," he ordered, his voice shaking. "We need to understand what we're facing." The transmission reached the New Horizon within seconds. Commander Yujin looked up from her console with something that might have been amusement. "Sir, we're receiving a communication request from the surviving Vorthak vessels. They sound terrified." "Put them through," Donghyun replied, settling into his command chair. The main screen flickered to life, showing Commander Bexnall's reptilian features twisted with fear and confusion. When he spoke, his voice cracked with panic. "What are you?" Bexnall demanded. "Your species was primitive. We observed you for months. Your technology was crude, your weapons ineffective." Donghyun's expression remained perfectly calm, which somehow made his words even more terrifying. "What you observed wasn't our military, Commander. Those were our police forces. The space battle you won so easily, those were our traffic controllers and customs officers." The alien's face went pale, if such a thing was possible for his species. "What you're fighting now," Donghyun continued, "isn't our military either. We're the cleanup crew, the people who handle problems that our police can't deal with. You really don't want to meet our actual army." As if summoned by his words, space around Earth began to shimmer and warp. Dozens of massive shapes began materializing as cloaking devices deactivated. Each ship was larger than anything. In the Vorthak fleet, their hulls gleaming with exotic materials and weapon systems that belonged in the nightmares of military strategists. The largest vessel was easily 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could probably destroy moons. Its hull bore the inscription, "Terror's Wrath," in letters large enough to be read from orbit. "Sweet ancestors," whispered Commander Bexnall, watching more and more ships appear around his fleet. "How many ships do you have?" Donghyun smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "That's classified information, Commander. But I can tell you this, what you're seeing now is just our local defense grid, the ships we keep around Earth in case someone decides to drop by uninvited." "Captain Ni." Minsu's voice crackled over the communication system from the bridge of Terra's Wrath. "Admiral Donghyun, this is Battle Group Alpha. We count 43 enemy vessels remaining. Should we proceed with standard encirclement?" Affirmative, Captain, Dong-hyun replied. Full tactical formation. Let our guests see what a real fleet looks like. The human ships moved with precision that defied belief, forming complex battle formations that would have taken the Vorthak hours to achieve. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering that represented centuries of hidden development, built in secret shipyards that didn't appear on any map. Commander Bexnal watched his doom approaching and felt something he had never experienced in his long military career: absolute crushing despair. His empire had sent him to conquer primitives. Instead, he had found a civilization so advanced that they made the mighty Vorthak Empire look like children playing with sticks. Commander, his science officer reported with a trembling voice, I'm detecting energy signatures from those ships that our computers can't even classify. Some of them appear to be manipulating space-time itself. The terrible truth was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't been conquered because humanity had never been primitive. They had been waiting, watching, preparing for this exact moment. The hunters had become the hunted, and the real war was just beginning. The crystal throne of Emperor Drexmar cracked as his clawed fist struck it. Across the vast chamber on the Imperial homeworld, holographic displays showed the complete annihilation of his invasion fleet. Not a single ship remained intact. The mighty Vorthak Empire, which had never suffered a defeat in 4,000 years, had just been humiliated by what he thought were primitive mammals. Impossible, Drexmar hissed, his 6 eyes blazing with fury. No species in the galaxy possesses such technology. Our intelligence reports confirmed these humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Grand Admiral Zixthul, the Emperor's most trusted military commander, approached the throne with obvious reluctance. In his 4 centuries of service, he had never seen his emperor so shaken. My lord, Zixthul said carefully, perhaps we underestimated them. Maybe we should reconsider our approach. Reconsider? Drexmar's roar echoed through the throne room. The Vorthak Empire does not retreat. We do not negotiate with primitives. Assemble the 12th Battle Fleet immediately. Zixthul's blood ran cold. The 12th Battle Fleet was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. 300 of their most advanced warships, including the massive super-dreadnought Universal Dominator. It was meant to be the hammer that could crush entire star systems. My lord, that represents 40% of our total fleet strength, Zixthul protested. If we lose that force, we will not lose, Drexmar snarled. These humans got lucky. They cannot possibly have the resources to face our full might. Send Fleet Commander Rexvar with the 12th. Tell him to turn that miserable planet into molten slag. 3 days later, space around Earth twisted and warped as the massive Vorthak fleet emerged from hyperspace. The Universal Dominator led. The formation, its 5-kilometer hull bristling with enough weapons to glass an entire continent. Behind it came wave after wave of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, the accumulated might of a galactic empire. Fleet Commander Rexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with growing confidence. Whatever trickery the humans had used before, they couldn't possibly stand against this force. The Universal Dominator alone carried more firepower than most star systems could defend against. Sir, reported his tactical officer, enemy contacts detected. Approximately 60 vessels in defensive formation around the planet. Rexvar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 60 ships against 300. They must be insane. All units prepare for bombardment. We'll finish this quickly. But as the Vorthak fleet moved into attack formation, something impossible happened. The space around Earth began to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was being rewritten. Ships that had been invisible suddenly appeared, not dozens, but hundreds of them, vessels that defied every law of physics the Vorthak understood. Sir, the tactical officer's voice cracked with panic, new contacts appearing everywhere. They're coming out of nothing. Rexvar watched in growing horror as the human fleet revealed itself. These weren't the crude vessels they had faced before. These ships moved like living things, phasing in and out of normal space, appearing behind his formations without warning. Some seemed to be made of pure energy, while others looked like they were constructed from materials that shouldn't exist. Deep in the human battle fleet, Fleet Admiral Tae-ho observed the approaching enemy from the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable Soul. At 55, he was a veteran of countless simulations and training exercises, all preparing for this moment. The ship around him hummed with power that could reshape continents, but his expression remained calm and professional. "Admiral," reported Captain Minna, his tactical officer, "enemy fleet has entered our engagement zone. 300 vessels, including one super-heavy dreadnought. They're moving into standard attack formation." Tae-ho nodded approvingly. The Vorthak were making the same mistakes they always made, assuming their enemies would fight by the same rules they did. "Very good. All units, implement Strategy Omega. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." Captain Minna's fingers danced across her console, sending coded signals to the human fleet. She had spent 20 years studying Vorthak tactics, weaknesses, and technology. Every simulation had led to this moment. "Strategy Omega activated," she reported. "All units acknowledge, beginning Phase 1. The human ships moved like a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. They didn't charge headlong into battle like the Vorthak expected. Instead, they simply vanished, reappearing behind enemy lines inside their formations, sometimes occupying the same space as Vorthak vessels before phasing back to normal reality. "What are they doing?" Rexvar demanded, watching his tactical display dissolve into chaos. "Ships don't move like that. It's physically impossible." His science officer, a trembling creature named Veltar, looked up from his instruments with terror in his eyes. "Sir, they're using some form of dimensional manipulation. They're not moving through space. They're moving through alternate dimensions and then returning to our reality." The first Vorthak ships began dying before they could even return fire. Human weapons reached out across impossible distances, ignoring shields and armor to strike directly at the molecular level. The proud battleship, Iron Fist, simply came apart at the seams, its hull unraveling like a piece of cloth. The cruiser, Death's Edge, flickered out of existence, as if someone had simply erased it from reality. "Impossible," Rexvar whispered, watching his fleet being systematically destroyed. "No species in the galaxy has mastered dimensional warfare. Even the ancients never achieved this level of technology." Captain Youngwoo, commanding the human vessel, Soul's Vengeance, watched the enemy dreadnought through his tactical display. His ship was barely a kilometer long, dwarfed by the massive Vorthak vessel, but it carried weapons that could unmake stars. "Target acquired," he reported to Admiral Tae-ho. "The enemy flagship is locked, requesting permission to engage." "Granted," Tae-ho replied. "One shot should be sufficient." The beam that erupted from Soul's Vengeance wasn't visible to the naked eye. It existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that had no names. When it struck the Universal Dominator, the massive ship's shields didn't just fail, they were rewritten out of existence, along with the fundamental forces holding the ship together. Rexvar felt his flagship dying around him, massive bulkheads peeling away like paper. Emergency systems that had never failed before simply stopped working as the laws of physics ceased to apply to his vessel. "All ships, retreat," he screamed into his communicator. "Full retreat, emergency jump to hyperspace." But the human ships were already there, waiting in hyperspace itself. Vorthak vessels trying to escape found themselves trapped in a web of interdimensional barriers, their escape routes blocked by technology that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we've lost contact with the entire 3rd Squadron. The 7th Battle Group is reporting total system failures. The World Breaker has just stopped existing." Rexvar realized with growing horror that his entire fleet was being systematically annihilated. 300 of the Empire's finest warships were being destroyed by an enemy that seemed to exist beyond the normal rules of space and time. With his last functioning communication array, Rexvar sent a final message to his Emperor. "Emperor, it was a trap, all of it. They've been watching us for centuries. This isn't a primitive world, it's a fortress. And we just declared war on something that makes us look like children playing with toys." The Universal Dominator exploded around him in a cascade of exotic energies that briefly lit up the solar system. As Rexvar died, his last sight was of human vessels emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Hundreds of them, each bearing the insignia of a military force that had been preparing for this war for 3 centuries. Admiral Tai Ho watched. The destruction of the Vorthak fleet with no satisfaction, only grim professionalism. The enemy had been eliminated, but this was just the beginning. The Vorthak Empire would send more fleets, and eventually, humanity would have to reveal the full extent of their capabilities. "Admiral," Captain Minar reported, "enemy fleet eliminated. No survivors detected. Shall we begin cleanup operations?" "Negative," Taeho replied. "Let their emperor find the wreckage. He needs to understand what he's truly facing." In the depths of space, automated probes sent the final recordings back to the Vorthak homeworld. The footage showed human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, and a fleet that had been preparing for this war since before the Vorthak Empire even knew Earth existed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the real war was just beginning. The silence in the Imperial throne room was deafening. Emperor Drexmar stared at the empty space, where his holographic fleet displays had been showing the positions of 300 warships just moments before. Now there was nothing. Not a single vessel remained. The largest military force in Vorthak. History had been completely erased. "My lord," whispered Grand Admiral Zixthul, his voice barely audible, "we're receiving a transmission from the human system. It's not from their military." Drexmar's 6 eyes blazed with fury and fear. "What do you mean, not from their military? Who else could have destroyed our fleets?" Before Zixthul could answer, the main communication array activated on its own. The massive holographic projector in the center of the throne room flickered to life, displaying the image of a human female in a uniform unlike anything they had seen before. Her insignia were completely unfamiliar, and her calm expression was somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. "Emperor Drexmar," the woman began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "I am General Haye Jin of the Human Deep. Space Command. What you've just witnessed wasn't a battle. It was a field test. The forces that destroyed your fleets weren't our army. They were our planetary defense forces." The Emperor's blood turned to ice. Planetary defense forces. If those weren't their military, then what had they been fighting? General Hijin continued with the same calm tone, as if she were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of an entire fleet. "You see, humanity has been aware of your empire for over 400 years. We've been watching you, studying you, preparing for the day you would inevitably find Earth." The revelation hit the throne room like a physical blow. 400 years? The Vorthak had believed they were the first to discover these humans. Their intelligence reports had confirmed that Earth was a primitive world, barely aware of the wider galaxy. "What you believed was a primitive world," Hyejin smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Drexmar had ever seen, "was actually the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Every mountain, every ocean, every seemingly natural feature had been converted into a weapons platform over the course of 3 centuries. Behind her, another figure stepped into view. Admiral Sung Ho, his uniform bearing insignia that suggested rank far beyond anything the Vorthak had imagined humans possessed. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of impossible truth. "Your invasion fleets encountered our home defense force," Sung Ho explained. "They did their job perfectly. They protected Earth and gathered complete intelligence on your capabilities. But they're not our military. They're essentially our local police force." Grand Admiral Zixthul felt his legs give way beneath him. Police force? They had sent the Empire's greatest fleets against what humans considered local law enforcement? "Our actual military," General Hyejin continued, her smile never wavering, "has been deployed throughout the galaxy for over 2 centuries. Your Galactic Empire controls approximately 8% of inhabited space. We've been quietly seeding colonies throughout the remaining 92%, establishing outposts and defense networks, while you played at being galactic conquerors." The Emperor's throne cracked further under his grip. "Impossible. Our scouts have explored every system in our territory. We would have detected your presence." Hijin's laugh was like the sound of distant thunder. "Every world you thought was uninhabited, every system you marked as explored but empty, we were already there. Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted, for them to see. We've been 3 steps ahead of your expansion for centuries. On dozens of worlds throughout the Vorthak Empire, similar scenes were playing out. Admiral Sung Ho's image appeared on communication screens across the galaxy, delivering the same impossible message to stunned Vorthak commanders. On the industrial world of Kethvar, planetary governor Nexthul watched in horror as the sky above, his capital city, began to shimmer. Massive ships decloaked, their hulls bearing human insignia. They had been there all along, invisible, waiting. "This is Admiral Park Jin-woo of the Human Colonial Fleet," came the broadcast from the lead vessel. "We have been monitoring this world for 43 years. Your industrial operations have been acceptable. That status is now under review." Similar revelations occurred across the Empire. On the military stronghold of Bextar, General Vexmol discovered that what he had thought was a moon was actually a human battle station that had been observing his forces for decades. On the trade hub of Lexvan, the space station's sensors finally detected the massive human fleet that had been cloaked in their own shipping lanes. Back on the Imperial homeworld, General He Jin delivered the final blow. "Your military forces are currently surrounded on every major world in your territory. We've been in position for decades, waiting for you to show your true intentions. You wanted to conquer humanity. Instead, you've just learned that humanity has already conquered you. You just didn't know it yet." The transmission seemed to end, but then a new voice crackled through the speakers. Emperor Drexmar looked up to see another human figure, this one wearing the insignia of what appeared to be a fleet commander. "This is Colonel Woojin of the Human Colonial Fleet, broadcasting from directly above your homeworld," the voice announced calmly. "Impossible. The Imperial homeworld had defense grids that could detect a single fighter craft at the edge of the A system. Yet somehow a human vessel had positioned itself in orbit without being detected. We have been watching you for centuries," Colonel Woojin continued. "Your empire exists because we allowed it to exist. That permission has now been revoked. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Any attempt to resist will result in the complete dissolution of your civilization." The colonel's final words echoed through the throne room with the finality of a death sentence. "We are not your enemies, Emperor Drexmar. We are your successors." As the transmission ended, emergency reports flooded in from across the Empire. Human fleets were decloaking above every major world. Defense stations that had been monitoring space for centuries were revealing themselves as human installations. Even the Imperial Guard discovered that several of their loyal alien advisors had been human agents in sophisticated disguises. Emperor Drexmar slumped in his cracked throne, the weight of impossible truth crushing down upon him. The mighty Vorthak Empire, which had dominated the galaxy for 4 millennia, had been living in a cage. They had thought themselves the apex predators of the cosmos, but they had been nothing more than specimens in a terrarium, observed and studied by something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The irony was complete. They had set out to hunt what they believed were primitive mammals, only to discover that they themselves were the prey. The humans hadn't just defended themselves, they had been preparing to inherit the galaxy. As reports continued to stream, so in from every corner of his crumbling empire, Drexmar realized that the game had been over before it had even begun. Humanity hadn't been conquered because humanity had been the conqueror all along. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the Vorthak Empire was ending, and the age of humanity was about to begin. The end.